You've been maybe reading a little bit about downtown development at times, and a few stories over the last week or two that have had to do with certain buildings that now will be the focus of redevelopment. And Dillon Davis at the Battle Creek Enquirer has been covering that, and he's here to talk about that today. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
How you doing?
I'm always a little disappointed when you don't have puppies in your studio. You always, I tell you that it's
Yes.
disappointing.
It's Wiggly Tail Wednesday, Dillon. Wednesday.
To get on a Wednesday show then.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, if you didn't see that, it was a puppy this week. And, you got to keep an eye on her because you give her an open field and she'd probably run. But
I hear that segment and I want to come down and just drop the money and just give me that puppy.
That's what they're hoping you'll do.
We'll make
that's
it
right.
happen.
So I'll tell them. You're the one. Okay.
Leave a business card behind, I guess.
That's right. All right, so you've been covering a set of buildings, actually, in downtown that were the focus of a land bank transaction recently.
Yes, sir, yeah. The 180Urban, an LLC here in town with a couple local developers, have finally closed on a purchase for 119 West Michigan, 64 West Michigan, and 15 Carlisle, the Carlisle building.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a plan. It's kind of tentative at this point. They're trying to kind of determine exactly the specifics, and they haven't shared tenant information, anything like that quite yet. But they want to redevelop these buildings. It's a process that's been long overdue.
Right.
I mean, I looked at our Enquirer archives recently, and they had a project by BCU in the early 2000s that had kind of a similar feel to this, and then for whatever reason, it just didn't get off the ground.
Well, and these are the challenges therein, and I guess we can talk about that. Let's talk for a second though about how a property ends up at the land bank. I mean, if the land bank has the building, that means it was foreclosed at one time, right?
No, that's not true actually.
Okay.
The Battle Creek Unlimited owned the buildings, and they deeded the buildings to the land bank.
Good.
It's a way to hold property, and they have they're tax exempt while they hold the property. So
right.
BCU was in charge of maintaining them while the land bank held them, which seems like they did to some degree. And the land bank takes that time and tries to market them and tries to find a developer that will fit the project. And I think that looks like they found one here.
Okay. So the land bank held on to those. Somebody comes along and says, I'm interested in this, and you try to strike a deal. What was the deal here? Do we know?
The deal, it's an incentive deal.
Yeah.
We talked to John Hart on this front, and he's talking about these buildings went for $1 a piece.
Okay, that's a good deal.
I'm sure you've got that in your pocket right now.
Yeah, sure,
but
yeah.
It comes with a very specific contract that's looking to redevelop them. There's performance incentives, and there's penalty provisions, and there are these things are put in place by the land bank to ensure that they get developed. They want to see the process go through. I mean, these buildings have been sitting vacant for quite a long time,
right, and
they're just functionally obsolete at this point. So they need someone to get in there and redevelop them. They think they found that with 180Urban. I guess we'll see when they get a time frame when that's going to happen.
We'll talk more about that in just a second on WBCK 814. WBCK Friday. Dillon Davis here from Battle Creek Enquirer. We're talking about downtown development, specifically 3 properties that have transferred from the land bank in Calhoun County to a group called 180Urban. And you mentioned that each of these buildings sold for $1. And, if you're not familiar with why they do that, you might sit there thinking, hey, maybe I ought to buy a downtown building. You start thinking about that. But really, there's a reason for this. The land bank and area authorities want to make sure that it's as easy as possible to promote the rehab of a building. And let's not forget, that's not cheap, right?
I had the opportunity to tour one of these buildings. I believe it was 64 last summer, and the building was not in good shape. I mean, it had a lot of debris in there. The walls were beat up. The infrastructure wasn't good, and there were quite a few people elsewhere that were touring it also, trying to take a look and see if it was something. And there were some people you recognized, some you didn't, and it just needed some work. So to incentivize that purchase, $1 is a low price because they know what it's going to cost to get it back to a livable space in a business space in others.
Right.
So that's where that price comes from.
Yeah. So you've made it clear these are not buildings that are ready to house luxury living or high-end retail space or anything of that nature. These are, at least not yet, these are places that are going to need a lot of work. And so that dollar price tag helps hopefully make it easier to get that work done. But you made a point before the break that these buildings, and you've underscored it now, are in rough shape, and so it's going to take some money to do that. These deals don't come together in 16 seconds, I don't imagine.
I have to think from the way I understand it, in the last 7 or 8 months, they've come along. They've done cleanup on the inside. They've done some roof work, trying to get livable. The one property, I believe it's 119. I could be wrong on that. Needs a lot of work. It sustained some snow and winter damage the past couple of years, and not so much this year, but really the past couple of years really hit it hard. So that one needs a pretty extensive process. They're going to look to have that's why they have this performance contract in place, though. They want to make sure that these things get done and that they have a downtown developer who's going to see it through, and that's not always been the case in the past.
Well, sure, it would be tempting for somebody to pay $1 and then not follow through on anything if they can't pull together the details. And so the land bank and the authorities here have to try and set up an atmosphere whereby this follows through. But what do we know about 180Urban's intent here? What have you been able to uncover?
180Urban seems genuine in their pursuit. They seem very interested in getting these buildings to a place where they can be a part of the downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that's spends time downtown Battle Creek will see Dave Saka. They'll see him down at Brownstone. He's down there and he's on his phone and he's talking to people and seems to know everybody in there. Him and his wife Alexa, they know downtown Battle Creek, and they have an understanding of what they're trying to get out of the process. And that's what Dave said over and over, that he spends so much time downtown and understands the culture down there and knows what it needs to kind of shift and take the next step.
Mm-hmm.
That's my understanding of those guys at this point.
Well, and that's sort of what you want to have happen, is somebody who has a genuine interest and wants to make things vibrant, which of course is the question. Has there been any chatter in your coverage of this that these buildings can't survive the way they exist, that they'd have to be knocked down and rebuilt, something else built there?
Only the one building, like the one I was talking about before. Okay. And it sounds like that would be, they would be looking to redevelop that into something else. The other two, the Carlisle building, the talk is that it would be a functional loft facility.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of things come along with that. You have options for parking and this sort of thing. I mean, there's just a ton of, when you build a loft in an area that doesn't have it, you have to be able to, have the infrastructure to support it. The other one would be, sounds like would be a very mixed use property, that it would host maybe, something on the ground floor, maybe a restaurant, maybe a business, and then it would have room for lofts or apartments on the top, and it's pretty spacious up there. So there's a lot of options they could do with it.
And we'll talk more about that in just a second on WBCK 823. WBCK, Dillon Davis is here from the Battle Creek Enquirer. We're talking about something you probably read about, a few properties in downtown that could be on the verge of rebirth. Wouldn't that be nice if they were? You talked about what the potential uses for some of these buildings are, and really the sweet spot for downtown development seems to be that mixed use to which you referred. That is to say, some sort of retail, residential kind of setup that allows for two different missions, really. That seems to be what people are most interested in now. Is that what you pick up?
That seems to be the kind of the sweetheart idea of downtown development right now. You're seeing it in towns across the country. I mean, I lived in East Lansing for years, and that's what they're talking about and they already do that very well.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to Ted Deering, you talk to John Hart, you talk to Rebecca Fleury, you talk to anybody that's doing downtown development issues here at Battle Creek. They want to be able to use that property, for a living and to have a business and to give it the room that it needs.
Have you heard any pushback as you cover this about the affordability of downtown living? I mean, when you talk about loft apartments and things of this nature, these are higher end developments, right?
You'd have to think so. I mean, I think the details are pretty light. I mean, I wouldn't be able to come to you right now with what it would cost to do that. I mean, I imagine it would have a price tag attached. That'd be reasonable to the market here.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, otherwise it's a nice, pretty little place.
Which projects. I mean, they have to get their money's worth out of it.
Yeah, there has to be a visible return on that. So there's no timeline yet that we know of, right, on these projects?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think right now. Well, excuse me, that's actually incorrect. There is a timeline. Okay. Right now, they're doing some due diligence to the building. They're trying to make sure. I mean, it's like I said, as part of the the performance incentives that are in there. They want to. There's just a process that 180Urban has to go through, before they start redeveloping, and that includes getting the land bank drawing the exterior. They need to kind of have an environmental, study. They need to. I mean, there's just a number of different objectives they need to complete before you're going to start seeing movement. If you talk to Dave, who's doing it, there already has been some movement. They have been cleaning it out. They have been. Right. There's a new wrap on a lot of the buildings that have their logo on it. Progress is being done. It's, there's just no timeline that's formal to when we can see it done yet.
Sure. So does the city or county or anyone of municipal nature have a say in the way this will look? Do they have to get, is it like a condo development where you have to have certain colors and you can't deviate? I mean,
I don't know that it's that specific.
Okay.
John Hart talks a ton about being kind of the middle party. He's in there and he's talking to Dave and he's talking to the land bank, and he wants to see it get done. That's a big win for him if he can come in and see buildings. I mean, then you're talking about that, coupling that in with the Heritage Tower project,
right?
Potential developments there with the Arcadia building, whatever's going on down with the Shrinks building down there. I mean, there's just a ton of different things going on, and there's a lot of moving parts. So I think the city is having conversations, and they're staying up to date with the land bank, and they're staying up to date with 180Urban. I mean, I think it's a mutually beneficial deal to get it done the way that builds a downtown culture.
You get the impression that there's an uphill thing going on here, and we are trying to make some extra horsepower here to get over that hump at the top, and we feel like we're getting close to that. Is that the feeling you're getting from covering this?
I get a lot of people that comment about Battle Creek and compare it to Kalamazoo.
Yeah.
Where, Battle Creek and Kalamazoo aren't really the same community. Kalamazoo's got a Division I university, and it's got it's just a different dichotomy there. Well, Battle Creek needs to be realistic about its identity and try to develop its own culture and stand on its own 2 feet. And I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to find that. They're making sure that downtown isn't a 9 to 5 experience, kind of the way it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Sure. Yeah. And a lot of towns struggle with that. I mean, look at Detroit, for example, where it's quite active during the day, but afterwards, if you're outside of, say, Ford Field or Comerica Park or, an area like that, Joe Louis Arena, it's fairly quiet. And so towns deal with this. Not every town is a Chicago where there's, or New York, where there's stuff going on all the time. So that's interesting. And the Kalamazoo comparison, I guess, happens a lot, but that's still not a completely sewn up situation. I mean, they have downtown development too, but in downtown residences, but there's always a vacancy situation that you deal with, and so on.
I think each have their problems and each have their challenges,
sure,
and each
exactly.
have their benefits too. I mean, you have to be more realistic that Battle Creek isn't Kalamazoo. Battle Creek is Battle Creek, and it has a you have the Kellogg here, and you have the Kellogg Foundation here. Those are two huge things, and you have a downtown with a lot of history.
Well, it'll be exciting to see where these things develop. Incidentally, I had a conversation with Dave Shaka yesterday from 180Urban. We've invited him to be on the show, and when he's ready, he will be, and we'll be excited to hear what their intent is.
I hope he'll come on. Dave's a smart guy. He knows what he's talking about. I think we'll have to see whether or not it goes through. I think I would bet for him, I think, at this point.
Yeah, well, it'll be exciting to see how it shakes out, and we'll be watching for your reports on that.
Thanks a lot, Rick.
Dillon Davis, Battle Creek Enquirer. Thank you. 8:20.